How's it going, everyone? We've got another guest with us. Our guest today is Mr. Jim. How are you? How have you been?
Been well. Good to see you.
Excellent, excellent. So, what's new? What has changed in the last year or so since we last spoke?
I guess not much has changed other than understanding
Mm,
for or understanding the mechanics of the experience, I guess, as being human. Uh, and
yeah.
understanding my own placement and like function, I guess, in the larger scheme. Uh,
Okay.
yeah, it's and just like learning what practices and have or what I was doing intuitively that I'm starting to recognize more explicitly now that was just
Uh-huh.
happening over time. Specifically, for instance, like with my band, is we were always like, we'd just get together and play, no conversation,
Just jam. Yeah.
just jam. But what I realized was that I have a bit of an ability to mediumship in a way, and that is what it was actually coming through. So now instead of doing it accidentally, we do it with intention and have set up, a nice studio with proper lighting and just organizing my kit even. We can go into more details with that, but just the things that it's hmm, how to say this cleanly. It's amazing what you do intuitively that are then so obvious just given the right information and the right context. Uh,
Right.
it's like silly things that you may pass off like tarot as a younger person. Now I have my Goetia deck, and
Which is
for,
like, there's two layers there already, like
yeah.
tarot and Goetia. Go ahead, please.
Well, the card I picked today is the Hermit, and
Very
I just
interesting.
picked it out of the deck, setting up. Just I wanted to pick a card out and see what came up, and it was the Hermit. So, given the Heathen Hermit, you know,
Yeah.
how we've met, I thought there's no irony in that, and that's the more of the recognition that I've started to take into my practice. And I guess just like subtle discoveries I found is when I started meditating a few years ago in like my basic practice, I was just kind of confused, been asking like general questions of like, what am I or what am I working with or what have I like, I don't know, merged with because it felt like I had merged with something like with bigger ideas, and it was much harsher. Like, and this was the one of the images which I think I showed in the last podcast.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah. Okay.
And
Yeah.
I
Yeah. You
have
did share that last time.
Well, the name I wrote on the top, and I'd never wrote a name on any of them, and very few have like a facial distinction. But I put Roth A, period.
Huh.
With your understanding of Astaroth and how that likes to represent itself, it come into clarity what was I was working with or what was help guiding me along, whether it's a little bit of an aggressive entity or, archetype, but it definitely leads
Can be.
it can hammer you if if you're upset,
Yeah.
and it
Well,
kind of teaches you to
that
get over yourself.
yeah, that makes perfect sense. I'm a musician as well. I work with Astaroth to enough of a degree that I have a little altar space set up right here. And him, people experience them differently. I experience them in a more feminine aspect, but
Yeah, me as
I
well.
definitely noticed a capacity to connect with other people
Hmm.
when I started working with them more. So it makes sense that you're describing mediumship
Yeah,
and an awareness of that. Very, very interesting. Um, keep going. Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, in my practice, what I've discovered is I seem to, I don't know, as on the drums is where it happens the most, but I play djembe, the hand drum as well,
Okay.
and
Mhm.
hand pan, but they're all done intuitively. I don't learn any songs. I've never learned a song. I never will learn a song, hopefully. But even if you come to like, I'll give you the link to my band, but all of those songs are unrehearsed, undiscussed.
Sure.
We just play, and it's amazing what can come through. But in the process of my development, as I didn't want to become a speaker, so to speak, of like
Mhm.
the ascension process or whatever. I wanted to do my work for other people through drumming because
Mhm.
by playing through the subconscious instead of saying the explicit, it can be less convoluted and get twisted.
Sure.
Because as every religion and spiritual teacher, it's the words are only as good as the listener and their
Yeah.
openness. So for me is trying to get away from that. So going to the visual arts and trying to incorporate like sacred geometry in the
Yeah.
Goetia those types of themes, ideas, and even I'm studying color now, just in how that can influence the experience. Doing more so intuitively in the past, but now trying to get a larger framework to work within and see what's already been done, like the like the many sacred geometry cults or occult practices of the centuries have a lot of great information in there. It's just, to me, it's not about getting chained into one practice. So
Absolutely.
I
Yeah.
I tend to sit in the, modern, neo-paganism or chaos magic. I prefer chaos magic, and I like to use the chaos sphere on occasion. It just seems to
Okay.
ring true with me because it's more of the build your own experience, follow your intuition. So I guess my practice is learning to tune that intuition and then learning to truly trust it. A few of my friends call it jokingly the passenger princess of reality, but that's kind of what it is, you do your work every day, whatever you've decided that work is, and you just do it. And if you're not seeking any specific outcome or any specific place, there's no end to it. It's just about finding what allows you to grow and what allows you to grow faster, and then also managing that growth, because sometimes growth too fast can lead
Yeah.
to some, like,
Instability. Yeah,
yeah, well,
absolutely.
it's the matter of, like, I have a regular job during the day. Like, I go to my studio, I play music, but it's like during the day, it's a very regular job. So it's like, entering the Godhead, so to speak, in the Master Eckhart. It's a day you don't want to be in the Godhead if you have to go do regular menial tasks. You want that as a temporary space. You want to sit and then kind of come back down and then have to go to your day to day, more human, regular citizen of America kind of thing. With as
Yeah.
much as reluctant and as much as I'd like to detach from that completely, it is still a necessity. Um,
Mhm.
in the practice, it becomes, I use it as the discipline that allows the like energy meter of creation. So it's like by finding discipline and doing your best, or trying to excel, seek perfection, never reach it, in everything that you do, seems to generate this just well of energy to go, play on the drum kit or play on any instrument or make artwork. So instead of
Right.
necessarily taking up like a yogic discipline practice, which I do some yoga, not against it, but instead of doing that more, as I see the day-to-day experience of being a modern human as the discipline access, like doing a job you hate very, very well seems to reward you in the other fields of your expression. And years ago, I would never really understand that. I kind of just did it because I thought that was like my principle. Like, I do a good job because the work reflects me, but I didn't realize like this wealth of energy that comes through on the creative side when you do
Yeah.
surrender to that fact. So what, your
Yeah.
job sucks. Just do a good job because that's,
Well, all creativity comes from sacrifice, right? So
yeah.
it makes sense from that aspect. And what you mentioned about having to like ascend and then descend, I mean, that's potentially one of the other meanings of solvent coagula, to be
Hmm.
able to dissolve into union, but then to be able to recoagulate back into our corporeal form and then actually put that experience to service.
Yeah, 100%. I found that like you can expand your consciousness far faster than you can understand the language to explain it. And that is what generally leads to like what is considered modern madness, or even like
Sure,
so
sure.
typical schizophrenic, manic depressive, bipolar, whatever category you want to get classed into. But those are all just this, spiritual constipation where you have these bigger thoughts, these bigger ideas, this higher sense of connectedness, but then you have to go, buy a cheeseburger at a kiosk and pay your taxes and pay bills. It's like this becomes the split because you see the potential that everyone around you in the world could have, but then it's not something you can necessarily change. So it's more of accepting what's around you and starting to control what's within, like the thoughts.
Sure.
And, you know, I referenced, I'm not a Christian, but like the walk on water is more of, it's not about physically walking on water. It's about being above your emotions and being away,
Right.
not necessarily tied to the sways of this guy cut me off in traffic and I'm pissed about that. Just accept that that happened. So what? It doesn't
Yeah.
change the practice. It doesn't change the growth. It just is happening. And getting into that place of neutrality is
Mm.
it was something I've worked heavily on in the last year, is finding that neutrality and finding that sense of self, of like where you want to, put your energy into the world, because you can take every, combative or like exciting event, and then that's where all your energy goes. So then when you go to your, your meditation place or your practice pad or your, notebook to draw, you feel a little bit emptier and you don't have as much to give because you're giving it away to the world freely when it's just
Well said.
it's just calling on your energy. And that's all it is
Yeah,
it's just an
absolutely.
invite to drain you and distract.
Well said.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
That's and that's something I've experienced as well. And that's one of the beautiful things about symbols. This sort of segues back to what you were saying about like illustration and using music to express truths. The symbols can mean so many things, like the walking on water thing. Like that can be an allusion to meditation. That can be an allusion to how the sun literally walks on the water.
Mhm.
The physical sun. That symbols mean so many things. And I've said this before on the channel, but Goethe, who wrote Faust, somewhere said something along the lines of words are wind and smoke that obscure the glory of the heavens, or
Yeah,
something like that. And I
I
just
have a really
that's
crude way of saying it. I say it's chunky and it's in it's
yeah,
it's
yeah,
like trying to play Tetris with the like geometric shapes instead of like square blocks. And it's like
right.
you think you're sounding coherent and you're clearing those Tetris lines, but really it's just a fucking mess. And you're trying to
And
abstractly interpret it.
yeah, well, and you raised another good point about all of this too, which was sort of cultivating will through overcoming adversity.
Yeah.
And that's another thing that is happening when you're doing these things that you don't want to do, or that are difficult to do, is you're cultivating a sense of will.
Yeah, 100%. It's I don't know, the struggle seems to be the only place to gather that. So it's even if I'm not
Oh,
physically demanded as I go and find other ways. Like I've in the last few years got
yeah.
into like mountain biking or like
Uh-huh.
road biking just because once you're going, it's like to maintain, you want to maintain that momentum, but it's a great lesson every ride is like you get up to the top of the hill, you blast down, but then you still have to slowly crawl back up the hill on the bike. There's
Yep.
no cheating up there. You could get off the bike, put it on your back and hike it, but that's still not any easier. The same weight, the same issues in front of you. So it's
Yeah.
finding the lessons and the simple little things that we're led to do has led like just being more open-eyed to the experience, I guess.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I'm all for that. I'm all for that. Um, yeah, and you also mentioned developing and cultivating understanding as
Mhm.
opposed to technique, or resources and assets.
Yeah.
That's I think that's very important as well. What is that, just something that you're doing through meditation and reflection, or do you have like a certain formula for extracting understanding from your life?
I guess is to try to almost tell the experience to myself as a story of someone else in that moment and trying to
Okay.
get the further you can get away from yourself, the more obvious it is. So instead of thinking, how is this
Mhm.
affecting me? Try to look at it as you're the teacher watching yourself be taught and
Sure.
seeing it from that outsider view is like I say, as I was joking with my bandmate recently, it's like thinking about modern times and I'm finally able to step out of what is now and look at it objectively. So it's like we look in, and this is a quick reference, but like we look at Aztecs with ancient sacrificial rituals, and it's like, oh, that's horrific. Well, it's like, there's like an equation every time we build a giant building or a bridge that they know that someone will die if X amount of dollars is spent. So we are doing this separated ritual of sacrifice of human life.
Yeah.
And it's the same for profits, like with the, recent in the news, the health insurance guy, sorry
Yeah,
how
the
that played
CEO,
out.
yeah.
But, that's, it's just two versions of sacrifice. One guy did it explicitly on the street and one did it through paperwork, but there's still a loss of life along the trail of that. And I guess in that larger realization a few years ago, as I realized I wanted to separate from that, like the exploitation and like I have to win, I have to take from something else or take something or someone from someone else or an opportunity instead of just like growing your own opportunity, creating something completely different and outside of the zeitgeist as it's usually pertained to.
Sure. Yeah.
So it's like I found that's it's isolating at times, but it's also quite useful. I find like sometimes I upset people with how I speak because it's so objectively, but it's also like that's their willingness to listen. You know, if I speak of a true objective thing, they know it's true, and that's part of why their energy reacts so quickly to it, is because
Yeah.
they're not ready to shed that skin of
They're
that.
too attached to it. Right.
Yeah, very attached to it. And yeah, it's interesting, and I've definitely like learned a lot through like Carl Jung and the the kill your hero in you. It's like going around trying to be a martyr or a hero is just foolish because we're all seem to be on our own little cable car, like getting pulled along, and we can
Yeah.
accelerate that process and we can slow it, but we can't really get off and we can't tell someone else how their cable car is going to go because we're not driving our own. And that's the the more objective, like surrendering to the experience again. That seems to be the biggest quality for growth, is just
Yeah.
accepting what is, not what has been. And
Yeah.
and I guess in merging, what I consider merging with the Godhead a few years ago, it truly shows the meaninglessness of like the true things. Like there is only one thing that can happen to you and you die, truly.
Mm.
Everything else is to be interpreted. Like you can't interpret death any differently. You just will, it will happen eventually. But everything up until that point is your choice and how you want to experience it. And that's one of the
Yeah.
biggest tools I've learned from just general chaos magic in the study of it, is that that's the way it works. So I guess.
So you mentioned the Chaos Star.
Mhm.
Is that a reference to Peter Carroll and his work, or is that
Um,
something else?
Partially, I mean, I take influence from Peter Carroll. I've read a few of his books, but also just the even Meshuggah, if you're familiar with that.
Okay. Yeah.
For
Yeah.
the chaos sphere, and I've realized like a lot of their allegories of the spiritual path through like Catch 33 and Nothing. It's interesting how I was drawn to the music in the past without really understanding any of the references, and how much of the music
Mhm.
the only music that I actually enjoy references all these types of symbolisms, allegories,
Yeah.
stuff. But I mean, I was 3 years old when I was originally getting into like some of the music, and it's
Very cool.
as almost I just turned 29 earlier this month, and seeing that correlation is so bizarre to me. So like, whether people like Chevelle as listeners, but like, or Radio Tool as they say, but it's like all those lyrics are referencing this process, this experience. But I was
Like
listening,
sending the pain below. Yeah.
yeah, well, like a lot of like like sci-fi crimes or like Mexican Sun, like all of those songs carry this just genuine, I don't know, it's almost like a call to the soul, to like this
Sure.
calling. But I
Sure.
was 7 years old when I was introduced to that music. And I was just like, this is cool. I'm an angry
Well,
teenager,
that's
but now I'm 30 and I'm like, holy shit, dudes. Like, what were you guys? You
yeah.
guys are onto something. Or I call
I think that's been a lot of well, maybe not a lot, but some of our experiences, because that sounds familiar to me as well. I A lot of when I look back and when I think about some of the things that I was doing around that time period, some of the music that I was listening to, I realize now that was a sort of initiation to some
Yeah.
degree.
Well, it's I mean, in the oddest point is like my personal initiation was like a full blown, like I was on top of a mountain, just doing camping trip psychedelics, like having a good time.
All right.
And then something else happened, and I had been like a user of psychedelics for years, but then it was different. And it was like in that moment, it was the moon spoke to me and was like, hey, don't
Mhm.
worry about it. I love you. Like kind of in that, not explicitly in words, but in feeling. And I was just like,
Sure, sure.
and that was, I mean, it took 2 3 years before I realized like that was kind of the initiation process that I was experiencing. And then, hindsight past my own life, as in the last couple of years, I've found out that my great grandfather, my great grandfather were both Skull and Bones members at Yale. So they were, uh, I've found resonance with Ishtar and Astaroth. They're both, I mean, they're just different names,
Right. Anana, yeah.
but that's their main shit. Like, my great grandfather was practicing this with the Skull and Bones, and going to Bohemian Grove and doing whatever. But I
Yeah.
had the owl and the moon tattooed on me when I was 18 without even knowing they existed. So
Well, that stuff was imparted on you in some way, shape, or form, if not just energetically and psychically.
yeah.
Like
Well, I
the
wonder.
symbolism was buried for sure.
Well, at first I was almost upset, like, what kind of fucking ritual did they do? Like, what did they tie me on? And I was like, what if it wasn't a ritual and they just resonated? Like, if that's my
Yeah.
genealogy, that's just what they would be drawn to out of nature,
Mhm.
not out of any like intentive practice, whether there was.
Sure.
And it's not like I can go back to 1915 and actually explore what went on, as much as I'd like
Well,
to try.
and blood is a very powerful thing. I've always felt like each like clan or family or like bloodline is almost the embodiment of an ideal or an amalgam of ideals. And so I don't know, it's almost like I come from a somewhat ceremonial family as well, and it makes me wonder, like, if they didn't get into it, would I still have? Like, this
Yeah,
is kind of what I was meant to do, it almost seems like.
well, it's interesting for me because I came from like a hard materialism, like atheist background. Like my grandfather of the last generation, he was like a Christian preacher. I think he was Presbyterian,
Mm.
in the city that I grew up around. But we never spoke. He passed when I was 7 years old, so we never spoke about religion or God or anything. So
Right.
when I went to church as a child, I actually was one of the first boundaries I ever set as a person was I just told my mom I was like that shit's not for me. Like whatever they're teaching in there, it's like that's fine, but it
That's
doesn't
not for me, yeah.
like
And
I felt very odd and off place and out of place. Like it just
mm,
did not fit with my ideals because I tend to sit in that objective rational of like
yeah.
precedes overall is the truth, and that's it. It's like whatever the truth is, we have to just deal with it as that is,
Mm.
and even if it's uncomfortable. So it's like, the uncomfortableness I found with, you know, being or resonating with it, what is considered a demon in modern like nomenclature is like coming from an atheist. You're like, geez, am I really on the fucking, what am I on the Sith side or the like, am I on the dark side? But you realize that that's all just like cultural programming to tell you to associate good, bad, evil. But like when you're on, after a few years, you're out of good and bad. You're out of this like black and white.
Duality. Yeah.
Yeah, like it's kind of a nonsense. It's a trick. Duality is a trick
Yeah. Oh,
because
absolutely.
you can chase the whole world trying to be a good person. It's just like
Hmm.
you can chase the whole world trying to kill bad people, but there always will be another one born. Like
Hmm.
so, it's an endless quest that just is like following into the abyss. Like, and I've met other practitioners that I don't know technically live in the abyss or the void, as they would say, because they couldn't bridge out of just accepting there isn't this good bad, this bad good, fight against good and evil. It's kind of a nonsense trope. It's
Hmm.
just energy balancing itself. Like,
Hmm.
and I don't know, my one of my biggest motives is like I have this ability to sense people's potential, and it's like how much is wasted on just nothing. Or just
Hmm.
I consider I don't know even like the cell phones or modern social media is kind of a projection of like a time demon, but like the inverse of Astaroth. Instead of controlling time, you lose all of it, and your life fleets away from you. And that would be like the darker side of that archetype is that
Sure.
you can find distractions and then all of a sudden you're dead at 82 years old or even earlier, and it's very easy to do. It's a very
Yeah.
that's when people say it's like, oh, I was 25, I graduated college, I got a job, and then I woke up and I was 40 and I hated my life. And it's like that's what I consider like the dark side of that archetype or that energy force. Because in my
Very
case,
interesting.
like I can kind of tweak my experience of time now, where it's when I have a lot of work to do, I don't necessarily have to feel the time that's passing. As long as
Yeah, just
I
focus through it. Yeah.
if I stay to the task, and then every once in a while, and this is more I've been able to recognize this time, but it's happened in other aspects of training way before it was ever music or mystical or magical practice. It was just happening, where
Mm.
there's time to sit and tweak the machine that is you into something that you see fit for the experience you want to have. But it's like you have to recede back in, even at like as I get older, it's more difficult to recede back in and start from a square one and realize that like everything before was a waste of time and isn't really going to be relevant going forward. So
Well,
you
we lose plasticity as we age in multiple ways anyway, so we're already fighting against that as it is.
Yeah, and what's the irony I've found is like I'm more healthy now at 30 than I ever have been and I still,
Excellent.
I had still smoke cigarettes, I still smoke, weed, and I should be unhealthy, but it's like I'm more fit than most people around me because it's about finding balance within the both, the
Yeah.
destruction and the,
Mhm.
building up, but it's all
Yeah.
necessary.
Yeah. So
There's no like easy ticket on the ascendant path, or the spiritual path or the mystical path. There's
yeah.
no easy lunch, no free lunch. Anyway.
So speaking about balance between light and dark, I think that's a decent segue into, you showed us part of your Goetic tarot deck.
Mhm.
It looked like the Fabio Lestrani version, but I'm not sure.
I'm not.
Um,
I tried to find the box for the artist, but I have misplaced it because I put it in a different carrying case.
it looks like the Fabio Lestrani version. I've got one over there, but
This
it's yeah, exactly.
Cerebro.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. He's one of my favorite artists. But so do you have experience with the Goetic spirits and like the like invocation and evocation, or like contracting them in any way, or have you just been sort of connecting with them through their imagery on the cards? Like, I guess
Um,
I'm asking what your relationship with the Goetic spirits is.
so from my own investigation of myself, it seems I just remember as a real young person, I kind of made a deal to trade fear
Hmm.
for something else.
Oh,
And
okay.
I'm assuming that's where kind of the larger tie-in with Astaroth went in, because what breeds fear is knowledge. So with that, like I've always had this compulsion for knowledge. Like I cannot stop
Oh yeah.
investigating. And it's good and bad. And now I've found balance in it, but it's definitely been hindrance at certain points because I'll say the thing that is the truth that ruins the friend group or the friendship or the
Yeah,
relationship
yeah,
or
yeah,
the experience or even the occupation because I just don't care. I have this indifference. The truth is above all monetary or,
yeah.
any kind of goal because it's the only way we can live pure, I guess, or
Hmm.
closer to it. Because I just want to live in a reality that is, and not
Hmm.
how someone's framing it to be, and told and projected at me. Like I'm comfortable with the, cosmic horrors all the way through the demonic entities. It's just
I think you have to be, or you have to at least strive to be, because
it's
if not, you're living in a delusion.
well, and a lot of times it's like there are unnerving moments where it's like you're overwhelmed with like the depth, like because I call it entering the Godhead, but like when I enter the Godhead, like I have no preference. I don't have preference on
Sure.
food. I just know I have to eat.
Yeah.
Bodily functions are like upsetting. Like, oh, I have to
Hmm.
pee. Like I have to drink
Yeah.
water. Like fuck that. This is insane. Like what
Yeah.
is this? Like because you know you devalue the self, and so then you have to like reincorporate and revalue the
Yeah.
self and understand that like this is your mechanism to experience, and that self-valuation is what has helped me clarify a lot of ideas. Is like you can think whatever you want, but you still have to be you, I guess, in a way. And
Yes.
sorting through Pan or like the creative madness is like I bridged that gap and then into the abyss and then in through Astaroth, and now I feel more. I'm not necessarily sure what's working through me because it's when I'm playing, I'm not thinking. That's when I get to go. That's when I get to merge back in with what I consider the Godhead or the universal consciousness. Is when I'm playing, is it's like I get out of the way and let whatever it is that I'm working with. And I've asked, tried to get more,
Sure.
like,
Sure.
and like the most I've gotten is that one image with Astaroth. So I just assume, and I also am inclined to say Sophia, like the Gnostic
Sure.
Sophia.
Hmm.
That's generally like I consider myself a Sophite or a philosopher is the study of Sophia. So it's philosophy. I mean, when you take it back to Greek, it breaks down into the study of Sophia. So it's just like
Elo Sophia. Yeah.
yeah. So it's those, and I've gotten little messages along the way that have just made that more obvious. It's like, and it's just interesting lessons as you go along. But it's following that divine feminine and just trying to channel that through my playing, just to kind of show that it's real, I guess, in a way.
Hmm.
It's like
Well,
to
and yeah, I think in my experience that makes sense, because in my experience, what comes from the well or the weave,
Mhm.
what comes from there is what you have sown or poured into it.
Yeah.
And I that's been my experience, because I've practiced with that. I've practiced completely restricting myself of anything and then
Yeah.
going into these states for long periods of time. And
Yeah.
what comes out is different than if I put in themes or icons or imagery. So
Yeah.
that makes sense.
When a lot of it is I knew at the beginning of my practice, and more so, I guess probably about a year before I spoke with you last, or the year concurring to that, is I realized that there's no way to unlearn things, but you can
Mm,
flood it with as much information as you fucking can. So it's
mhm.
by like the last 2, 3 years, it's just dumping all kinds as much as I can because I have this resonance feeling. So I know what is my truth or truthful to me. And I can immediately tell a grifter. Like it's weird because like I could pull up any YouTube video of like esoteric stuff and I go, this one's bullshit, that one's real. Within the first 3 minutes, I
Mm,
know which ones have useful information. So it's nice to have that sensor and not be lost in like the swill of just grifters. I mean, that's the big
yeah.
issue. The biggest thing to get around in any of these practices, avoiding grifters and avoiding becoming one.
Hmm. Yeah.
And
That is, I mean, we live in such a weird place now where it's like everything you do, like no matter what you do in this life right now that puts bread on the table, like you're also confronted with like the potential of, okay, well, do I make a social media account about this?
yeah.
So
Well,
like even in day-to-day life, it can be hard to not like shell ourselves out.
mhm. Well, it's I don't know. I almost like studied cult leaders for years to make sure I didn't become one, like to become
Sure. Okay.
like just because it can happen on accident. Because I do have an ability to just I don't know. It's like I have an effect on people when I speak that
Mhm.
some people call it high vibration. Some like as a kid they called me
Or
an old
charisma.
soul. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't really know. I just speak what I think or what I feel. I'm not trying to.
It might be the way you feel when you're speaking, because that's something that I've noticed too, is there is a certain tension in the atmosphere or lack of tension
Mhm.
when a certain person is saying a certain thing, and you can almost feel like whether it's coming out of them or if it's just like, I don't know, like coming off of them from somewhere else.
Well, I call it parroting because it's just
Okay.
like a
Yeah.
bird. Well, it's like
Yeah.
a bird can repeat anything, but it doesn't know why. And
Uh-huh.
we can easily we're born, and especially in modern society, it's like up until you're about 25 is you're just a parrot. Like it's anything from how the weather works to geology to spirituality is you're just repeating something you've never experienced. And you're saying it with so much confidence and arrogance, really,
Sure.
that it's
Yeah.
like at some point it's like I've definitely been tempted to take almost like a vow of silence, but it's like
Yeah, sure.
it's very impractical in the modern world without just being a kind of a douchebag to everyone around you. So
Sure.
so it's like finding ways you can practice. Like I took a couple years of like almost an ascetic lifestyle, whereas like I maintained celibacy, went to this, all I did was work on the studio, work on art, work on making money to maintain those things for a few years, and that is where like the most growth is. But you're also creating your own cave. Like
Mm,
you're creating your Plato's cave. Like yes, you grew up in the world of Plato's cave, but now you're creating your own. So it's like at some
yep.
point you still have to get out of the cave and practice
Yeah.
it and see if it's practical.
Well, that's the abyss too, to
Yeah,
some degree for a lot of people.
it's true. Yeah, and I honestly find comfort in the abyss. It's like this. I've I in the Jungian sense are the one. Like I guess he put as a psychological disposition to never want to have been. It's not
Hmm.
necessarily a wanting to die. It's just to
Yeah.
not to the craving for non-existence. And
Hmm.
I was my birth was kind of weird. Like I was born and then put in like one of those preemie boxes, but I was
Hmm.
10 pounds, so I was stuffed in this plastic box for a week after I was born. And I wonder if that kind of captivated this like longingness for nothing because it's like I came from the womb instead of into like a loving parent's arms, I went into a plastic like
Sure.
confinement. And I
I
think
see a parallel there. Yeah.
and I see that as maybe the cause for it if it wasn't already programmed into, just my being, is
Well,
because
and who knows if that didn't happen because it was a prerequisite to you understanding your purpose, and
yeah.
you know what I mean? Like maybe you were meant to crave the void, so that happened. Like it's
And I,
hard to say.
and I think that's what leads to a never-ending search the information because it's what I don't connect to. It's like I don't have the natural connections. And like in modern society, they'll call you a psychopath or a sociopath, but I mean no harm or evil to anyone. It's just I just don't care. Like I don't need to please you. Like
Yeah.
I'll go to the other 8 billion people. Like it's a rational disposition, not really an irrational, like fuck everybody. It's like, dude, I don't need to change myself to make you think that I'm something else. It's like I'm
Hmm.
just gonna be. And that makes some people very uncomfortable, especially
Hmm.
like family members, when it's like, why can't you just be like a, whatever, good brother? I'm just like, it's not in me. I'm not compelled to. I don't have these
Yeah.
person to person connections. I feel connected to the human race as a species, as like I
Yeah.
want us to accelerate as far as we can get. And like, and the only moments I ever felt like that was actually happening was like seeing Meshuggah live or seeing Tool live. And it was like, oh, when you truly devote yourself to a thing, it becomes something bigger. And I mean, seeing Meshuggah live, I saw him a couple nights. I've seen him, I think 3 or 4 times now. But there's this old energy, like this just
Yeah.
rawness that you feel and it radiates to you. And it's just like this. Ah man, it blew my mind. I just like, but once I experienced it, I was like, if that's real, then I don't care what else is. Like if feeling that experience and whatever they're tapped into is real, then nothing else could matter outside of it, because it is truly like being able to operate at a level above what is like, humanity, I guess.
Hmm. Well, and not to mention that you mentioned feeling a connection to humanity at large. Everybody at a concert is well, I should say most people at a concert are on the same frequency,
Yeah, they're
on the same
synchronized.
wavelength. So whatever they are pushing, whatever frequency or in energy that they're putting out, like it's resonating and crystallizing
Hmm.
almost.
100%. I would like to have my spiritual practice not be so tied into Tool, but like it's like I'm not like the guy who's like trying to hyperanalyze. Like I kind of just know what they were saying, but it
Yeah.
was like
Well,
the moment I met up.
mysticism is built into their music. So when you think of that stuff, Tool will probably naturally come to mind.
Well, it was even in the experience of it. Like the first time I saw them, my current guitar player, who I knew from growing up as a child, he was in the same suite as me. And from that point on, this band and my practice has been like a slowly evolving, rolling down the mountain, picking up steam and speed. But it
Mm.
was like from that moment on. And then I think it was 7 years to the day we saw Maynard perform with Pussifer with our new member. And it was 7 years
Interesting.
exactly to the day of the
Huh.
original Tool concert. And it's like those types of moments are like, like just a little bit like that's weird, because I remember getting the memory while we're at the Pussifer show, and I'm just like, wait a second, this is the same day 7 years
It's
ago.
like aligned. Yeah.
Yeah, like exactly aligned in this loop, while the other, like our third member, our bass player, joined in at that new date. So it was like there was like that door opened for a new member to join in and kind of like take the ride with us, I guess, so to speak.
Very interesting.
Yeah, we've been jamming 9 years and don't have a song written because we don't write songs. But
It's
it's
interesting how you can do that. Like when you mesh with people, it's almost better than having a conversation when you
it,
can just improvise and jam.
well, there's
There's
moments.
nothing like it.
Well, there's moments where it's like, I mean, we've been doing a long time, and I consider like myself as more of like the eye for I try to channel divinity through their playing. So I take their energy, kind of work it on the other side, and then come back through my playing and try to bring their playing up, try to make it sound and more punchy and trying to line up everything. But it's like in those moments, it's like I'm trying to be a transparency for the projector that is source, or you call it divine,
Sure.
but I just think of myself as the transparency. And it's not that like I have anything special. The only thing I'm tweaking is what's drawn on the transparency. So it's, you know, when I practice my artwork or I practice my drum kit, whether it's on a practice pad or the full kit, is I'm just honing the image that's getting projected
Sure.
through.
Yeah. Yeah, you didn't dye the wool and you didn't come up with the pattern. You're just weaving the strings that they're giving you together into something else,
The
essentially.
tapestry, yeah, the
Tapestry,
tapestry
yeah.
of
Yeah.
consciousness, I guess.
Uh-huh.
And it's Yeah, it's a fascinating endeavor, especially like, 5 years ago, I was running nightclubs and bars and doing bartending stuff. And, people talk about, what is like sacrifice. Like I was making like over 120,000 a year. And I just gave that all up, stuck to my one day job, which I make about 40K. And as long as I can maintain practice, I'm really indifferent. But it's like
Yeah.
people will like be like, well, how real is it, or how much, like, what does it cost you? I'm like, well, monetarily, like, I don't know, almost $500,000 by just not using what I was using before to my own benefit.
Right.
Like all my previous effort, I had to just leave to the side and just
Mhm.
carry on in a different direction. And that's, I think, the hardest, I call it eating the elephant. It's one bite at a time, but like giving up that past self that you're so invested into, of like, this is, even your own name is kind of foolish. Like it's something
Yeah.
bestowed upon you. It's not something
Uh-huh.
chosen. So it's
Yeah.
everything
Yeah.
back from the day you were born is a projection of someone else's beliefs onto you, and it's a long process to strip that back. Like quite.
Yeah, it definitely can be. Ceremony and ritual are really good for that.
Yeah, well, it cleanses the one out because it makes you see the objective instead of how
Yeah.
you want it to be fit to. And yeah, it's fucking fascinating.
So, while I'm thinking about it, happy belated birthday. You mentioned that you just had a birthday, so I made
Yeah,
a note of that.
thank
So
you.
happy belated birthday. Did you do anything fun or interesting for your birthday?
Uh, just played music. Like that's
Hey, that's
the
fun and
best.
interesting. What do you mean?
Well, it's like we have a really nice studio set up now. Like in the last year, we were able to expand like threefold the square footage with maintaining the same rent. So we went all out and set up everything. And I've been able to expand the drum kit, and now I'm exploring on the bass guitar and studying like
Okay.
Phrygian modes, because if you didn't know, Phrygian, the original, was Ishtar, was the name of the Phrygian mode. So I'm starting to working on channeling through bass and following like cues from Al, Soneros from Ohm, and just having a
I
drummer.
was gonna ask you about I figured you listened to them.
Ohm is huge. I mean, I almost start every day with whatever he tapped into back then and now is just, there's something right about it. And it's
Seemed like a lot of like, well, I mean, they have an album called Ayurvedic
hmm
Verses or something, so there's a lot of that in Buddhism and stuff. But yeah, that's good stuff. Do you know who Shamash is?
no, but I should write that down.
Okay, so 4 or 5 times you have mentioned accepting things as they are.
hmm
There's this band called Shamash, which is a reference to the sun. It's Shamm. A
A-N-M,
yeah,
and then what? Or
M-A. Is it a parallelogram? No, not a it's a palindrome. So it's Shammasch. So I guess it's not a palindrome, but yeah. Anyway, there's this
okay.
band called Shamash, and they have this song called Metanoia. And the very end of the song ends with this incantation or prayer.
hmm
And I've actually incorporated it into my practice because of how powerful it is. But the very end of it is, the last stanza is, give me the strength to accept whatever is and may be.
Yeah.
And they're right in there with Ohm and Meshuggah and Tool. They're not post metal, but like they break down into, like they do the crescendo decrescendo
Yep.
thing. There's a lot of mystical imagery. I think you'd like them.
No,
I'll
I
send you a
pulled them
link.
up. I pulled them up on Google so I wouldn't lose it, because that sounds
Listen to the song Metanoia.
the actually the most recently, do you know Batushka from Poland?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, their incorporation of like reworking the Orthodox
Liturgy.
text
Yeah.
into, well, what people don't understand is they think it's like spiritual narcissism and that he's claiming it's I, and it's no, it's when you recite it, it becomes I instead of
Yes.
it's supposed to be personal empowerment. And I remember that was one of the ones that led me on just this weird realizing that there's a censor to this stuff, because I don't know the lyrics. I couldn't understand the lyrics, but I'd still get that same charge come through me. And I'm like, okay, now I got to do some research and understanding where they come from. And I definitely align with a lot of like the, I mean, the Eastern Orthodox, where it's like your suffering is all voluntary. It's like
Mhm.
whatever you're suffering and is you chose, whether it's like a loss of a loved one, it's like, well, you're suffering because you chose to have a loved one at some point, whether it was
Yeah,
intuitively or not. It's like you're always making this trade. So
sure.
like this joy is always transcendent. It's like with the lack of. And I definitely mixed more of like Gnostic with Eastern Orthodox philosophy. Like I like the hardness of the Eastern Orthodox, but I'm definitely not. I don't like other people's rules or groupthink. Like I have no interest in someone telling me how to do it because
I
I
love it.
feel
Yeah.
what I should be doing. If
Yeah.
I didn't, I
It's all
wouldn't
a
get.
template, man. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I joked last night speaking is like I love to like pick apart the Bible stories for fun and just like
Mhm.
try to see what original metaphor was laid in. But like the Noah and the Ark, I don't think it was ever a boat. I think the Bible was like the boat was the metaphor for the Bible of a structure that can carry you through tumultuous times.
Interesting. That
That
is a good metaphor. That's another thing about what I mean about symbolism is that story can mean 1,000 things.
Yeah. And everyone wants it to mean one thing, and it really
Mm.
means 1,000 things. And it's
Yeah,
about us
like
like just discussing it.
I've heard someone theorize before that Noah's Ark is the code of DNA.
It could
I've
be.
I, I've heard people say that that storytelling, like
Hmm.
we tell the story about Noah's Ark, and that it like storytelling. As that's one of my favorite theories is that you know legend craft and myth crafting is Noah's Ark, and what a beautiful way to hand it down.
Yeah. Well,
Other
it's
than
like well,
it's fractal.
it seems like it almost aligns with like any spiritual practice is that's the boat to get you through your emotions. Like if you just look at it that is
Yeah,
like whether
through the
you're
storm.
Buddhist or you're Tao or you're Christian, it's like that's your vessel that you're now aligning with and resonating to. So you become a vessel of that. So whatever
Yeah.
you're resonating to, you become the vessel, which is the boat, which is the book, which is the practice, which is, wherever that leads to. But it almost seems that like as a species, we've convinced ourselves that there's one person that's supposed to do it and teach us, and it's no, it's
Yeah.
within us all. It's the old saying is the wound is what lets the light shine through. Well, the
Yeah.
light's always there, and that's what I try to explain to people. We've been convinced a lot of the time that the wound is the point, and then we're
Mm,
supposed to just preach of our like discontentment or like what's gone wrong or poor me or poor that, and it's like no, that's only supposed to illuminate the valuelessness of all those things and
yeah.
supposed to clean the slate to let you start to decide what is meaning, what is truth, what is objective. You know,
Maybe so.
yeah, or and to nod to Aleister Crowley is like the love under will is an easy one. It's like, well, what if I do like, am I gonna do evil things? It's like, well, do people want you to? Or it's like more of it's if you're a nut job that wants to do harm on people, you're going to. If
Yeah.
it just is, and if you're not going to become that through your practice unless you're, I don't know. I don't see the influence. Like I'm not influenceable in that way. So it's like I see it as like a low point of the human experience to do harm to others or take advantage of. It's just like it's so easy to do, so it doesn't seem valuable. It's like it's a
Hmm.
lot like you can steal candy from a baby, but then
Hmm.
what are you? You're just a thief from a baby.
Yeah.
And that's a
Yeah.
lot of like that's really getting one up on your fellow human being is all you're doing. It's like just because they don't know and doesn't mean you should take advantage of them.
Hmm.
Your knowing should elevate you above that, outside.
Yeah.
But I find there's a hard gap in spiritual process or spiritual ascension is there is a point where you're the outsider again, and you kind of have this resentment at the others for not knowing, and then you kind of can you take that as or cult leaders or pious religious people that have gone awry seem to be stuck in that level of ascension where they then start to like feed off of people's strife.
Well, I think like that it goes back to what you're saying. Like I think it takes a certain kind of like narcissist to do something like that. And like most cult leaders are very narcissistic.
Yeah.
So it just breeds that whole energy.
Yeah, and it's yeah, it's tough to I don't know in sorting through all the spiritualities and stuff. It was like what is a good practice, what is a bad practice, and it's nice to be outside of that now. But it was like I
Mhm.
remember that was like the big sorting because like as you go into like the Goetia or you go into any of it, it's like all these like rumors or worries of like oh, and then I got possessed and this that and the other. But it's like you can also kind of do a willing full possession. Like you can
Yeah.
go into it with like I kind of with Astaroth almost did a willing full possession for a few
Yeah.
years because I wanted to align to that. So the best way to do it is kind of become it. It's not that I completely
So
lost myself, but
what sorts of ways did you go about to bring that experience on?
I would say it just kind of started happening. Like I would
Like
say,
you just opened yourself up and allowed it to happen?
well, it was strife of experience in the old version of myself. So it's
Aha.
before
Okay.
before I ever knew any of this, it was like I literally went to my mother and was like, I'm dead. And like in a way, I was like, I did a living suicide. Like everything from that point on is gone. And that
Yeah.
was before any of my spiritual practice. We were just at lunch and I was like, I had to hit it
Yeah.
because what happened was my life experience pushed me so hard against my own principles that I couldn't act on my principles and then still experience. Like I would have been pushed to a crime to act out my proper principles. And I don't
Sure.
need to get into the details of it because they're not necessary, but I was just pushed to the end of my own belief system of my
Yeah.
which was just based on principles of like, protect the weaker ones around you and don't lie and don't do that. But when you can't protect because of the way, in modern society we've given justice, we've raised it up to authority figures. So it's like you can know bad people or people that have done horrendous things, but you can't act out and snuff them out or get rid of them. That's just,
A little
or else
bit
you're now the
replace them.
criminal. Well,
Yeah.
then you become what they are.
Oh,
And
that too. Yeah. Yeah, that too.
but also it's like society will not align with your morality or your principles. Like the laws are the laws, and that is what it is. So you're existing in this. And that is what pushed me. It was like realizing that my environment didn't support the same principles and morals that I had when it actually came down to like what I considered
Mhm.
right and wrong. And by not acting, I also considered myself like pathetic and like this just like what have I let myself become to not act or to live so long thinking I would act and then not to. So it was
Yeah.
like I guess I just disappointed myself or my soul, and then that
Yeah.
drive it away. And then that's when I went into the abyss. And I was in the abyss for a few years because I couldn't just accept what was and
Yeah.
accept my own inability to act. So
Hmm.
that seemed to open the doorway for just this like cosmic understanding. And that because it pushed
Yeah.
me outside of myself because I was sick of myself.
Yeah.
So then it's like returning into I call it falling out the bottom. Like a lot of people are on
Yeah.
the path and they're going up the steps, but I went down to the lowest point and then straight through the bottom to the top again. And I would definitely say psychedelics helped with that, but they
Yeah.
almost just encouraged it or made it more obvious that bigger things were happening.
Sometimes that's part of the formula, part of the cycle. And that is a lot of what this channel is about, is using some sort of system so that
Mhm.
we don't just fall into the depths.
Yeah.
Because if we use a structure like the tree of life or the tree of Qliphoth, like it allows us to take marketed, measured steps, or it makes it more likely that what we're doing is measured and marketed. You can definitely still slide down, but that is, I think that's a part of it.
Well,
It's
that's what
called the dark night of the soul in some
that's what I
traditions.
wonder. It's when I meet grifters, it seems to be the people the most I don't know, the equation for a grifter to me is seeing someone who's had a very just normal life, not a lot of strife or experience
Mhm.
in the darker side of reality of like what is true human nature? What do we actually do to each other? Like this
Mhm.
self-exploitation just with friends, with family, like there's always this like me underlying a lot of the decisions we make. And observing that and accepting it, that like a lot of people's human motivations, they say they're doing, oh, I'm just doing this to help them out, but it's like no, you're doing this so you appear better. You're not necessarily doing that. Like there's
Yeah.
empathy, true empathy, which is going and giving yourself to others and trying to help people, but then there's empathy where it's you want to be seen as one of those people. And I
Mhm.
find that second tier of empathy is when they go into the meditation practices, is they start to they think they're tearing up, but there's a hard cap because they don't accept reality as it is, like the true
Mhm.
animalistic natures we have and our like propensity to violence and things like that. As it's just part of us. It's not something. It's not a flaw. It just is. It's something to be conquered.
Ascended, yeah. Well, that's what this is all about potentially, is turning vices into virtues, I think.
Yeah.
Turning this precious lead into gold, you
Yeah.
know?
Actually, oh man, my gears are starting to turn. But like, what started essentially the process was just quitting alcohol. It's like
There
because
you go.
I realized the alcohol was allowing me to dip into a lower conscious that I wouldn't, because I'm not prone to violence, but if I was under the influence of alcohol, then it was like it gave that a way to work through me, and I didn't like that anymore. So it
Yeah.
gave up alcohol based off a a little mushroom trip, and it just told me it was poison, it's killing me, and I was like, okay, enough of that.
Yeah.
Kind of just
It's
stopped.
it's funny how giving up a suppressant can assist in ascension.
Mhm. Yeah, 100%. It was kind of like I had this moment in the Dark Night of Soul, and I was like, if you're so fucking sad, why are you using a depressant? like,
Yep.
like,
Ding.
it was just like this rational like loop cycle that finally completed. And it was like, if you're actually sad and you're actually upset about it, why would you use anything that also like depresses all of the emotions, all the experience? And I went from alcohol from like a adrenaline addiction. I used to ride street bikes doing like we used to run from
Ah,
the
the
police.
pendulum swings.
We used
Okay.
to run from police for fun because like I could hit this trance state again, like I would merge with almost the universe
Yeah,
and
I get
also
it.
telecommunicate with my buddy. So like me and him would ride so close at 150 miles an hour, we'd freak out the other dudes we rode with. They'd be like, "Can you guys stop fucking doing that?" I'm like, "I know where he is. I don't have to worry about it." And he's
Uh-huh.
also on the process now, a good friend of mine. But it's like at the time we had no idea what we were doing. But
Yeah.
it's like coming from that is I had this nothing because nothing was exciting anymore. It's like when you face death head on and you hang yourself on a fishing line for death to grab you, and it never does, you feel this hollowness afterwards. It's like,
Yeah.
what the fuck is
Nothing I
this
do
about?
matters.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like nothing matter. Like it's nothing. Like you could wave a
Uh-huh.
like literally you like part of what made me realize is I needed to do something was there was an incident where someone was like speeding through our neighborhood and we yelled at him and he gets out of his car with a machete and starts coming at me. I didn't stop. I started running at him to the point where it scared him. He got in his car and took off. But I realized that like only because I was under the influence of alcohol that I was not thinking rationally of like I'm
Sure.
gonna go unarmed running at a man with a machete for what? Like that's like I was just like, what the fuck is wrong with me? So it's
Yeah.
like I went through and that, I even at one point ended up at the psychs like, all right, I need you to check me out just to make sure I'm not fucking nuts and just go through that process. Because again, without any spiritual framework, you just feel like a mad person or you get lost in
Yeah.
pan, as some people have like described it as like the creative madness, is you have so much creative energy that you just it's overflowing with ideas and thoughts and allegories and this and that. And you can't be in the experience because you're thinking 15 different ways about it in one moment. And now that's great when I'm a drummer to think 15 different ways in a moment
Mm.
is how I play my music. But when you don't know how to channel that, that's just in your brain, squealing, burning like an engine.
Yeah. Or if you don't have a canvas
Hmm.
for it. Yeah, that can be extremely devastating,
But
especially in our younger years. If we
well, I
don't
find
learn how
we
to channel that creative energy at a younger age, it can be devastating. Go ahead.
no, and I find it's that going through the Dark Night of Soul is like you're recapturing all that energy, but then you have all this energy you don't know what to do with. And
It's
it
yeah, it's a
in
cyclic. Yeah.
well in Jungian's Carl Jung's own like studies is he found that like so many of these people that were going through this ascension or skits break or whatever, however you want to class it, they're kind of all in the same category to me, but they would all draw mandalas. Like
Uh-huh.
we had over
Uh-huh.
4,500 patients unpromptedly start drawing mandalas. So there's just this overflow of energy. And actually, the first thing I did artwork wise is behind me
I,
on my wall. But if you look, it's a waterfall going into the head of a man, and then it was overflowing and spilling out the other sides. And
that's a beautiful symbol. Yeah.
I intuitively just drew it on the wall when I was painting my new apartment, and I was like, I'm just gonna do an art piece on one of these. It's just basic, two like one color. But that's what I drew intuitively. And it wasn't until like a while later that I started to see the face and I started to see the symbolism. And it wasn't 3 or 4 years later until I read Jung and then saw him even explain. It's like the overflowing well of energy ends up
Yeah.
dipping into other places, and he referenced the mandalas for that specific display.
That's awesome.
So it's a lot of it is weird, is like when at first you think you're on your own process, then you realize it's kind of universal, but then
Mhm.
also extremely unique to you. So it's like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
it's all again, it's like it's so convoluted and like it's all cyclical. It all becomes this moment. Uh, and another moment is that moon experience that I had is on our way back from the trip. We stopped at this like boutique shop, and I was drawn to this ring, and it was like the illumination ring. So it was the eye and the pyramid and the light rays going out. And when I finally like I came out of that process, the ring broke. Like once the
Yeah.
brooding was done, the ring broke and it could no longer be worn anymore. And now it sits behind my drum kit, and I got a newer ring, which is it's got, Molech and the Ouroboros and the eye as well, and then on the sides it's the death skulls. And it's just accepting that like what you are today is probably going to be consumed by yourself and, turned into another version of you, like as time goes on. It's just accepting
Yeah.
the process. But
Yeah.
I don't know, in the last year is shedding a lot of grief of the old versions of me, like the old friendships that I didn't maintain, or the old versions of me that like I liked parts of it and I liked moments of it, but it was not good for me. And
Right.
that's the final acceptance. But it's like at the time you're like, man, I miss hanging out with the boys, or I miss having this like dynamic relationship with family, but it's just not for me anymore. I was like, I'm outside of that for good, better or worse. It's the path isn't exactly the most like you don't have the it's fairly isolating. That's the easiest way to put it at times.
It's like it's funny because it feels like it's isolating, and then you get something to give, and then you're brought back into this collision course with a community of some kind,
Oh
and then
yeah.
you like give this gift, and then like it's like you have to give away the stone.
Well, it's the what's the classic like I learned recently like the Druids or the Druids is like why they were called that is because they like every year you'd meet them. Why they were referred to as snakes is because every year you would meet them, they'd be a different person. So that's why they referred them to as the snakes. So like the classic Irish holiday, it's like
Yeah,
the snakes out of
driving this.
Ireland is they were
Yeah,
running the Druids out of Ireland, like the
yeah,
true mystics, while the king had one in his own castle. So like at all times, or they had a bishop or whatever. So it's like they took away the, magical practitioners for the people and then held them for their own. And I don't think that's necessarily been good for like
no,
the
not at
entire
all.
consciousness of the human race, and especially with alcohol being the main proponent of that holiday, or St. Patrick's Day. I see
Yeah,
no irony in that. Like the main
yeah,
holiday that suppressed modern Irish like mysticism also uses a fuck ton of alcohol to suppress Irish mysticism. And being partially Irish, it's like I'm not pissed off about it, but I'm like, that's not fair. Like that's just not fair at all. Uh, yeah, and I also wonder as like having an Irish background and a German background and a Dutch background is like I feel like well Irish philosophy actually lines up a lot with Hinduism for what reason. So I get drawn to Hinduism a lot, and I think in recent times they found genetic correlations between Indian people and Irish people with the redheads. Like they carry the same genetic line through both cultures, and I wonder if that's why the symbolisms kind of align when you get back into the older Irish mysticism. It kind of starts to align with Hinduism a bit, and I attribute that to why I'm drawn to Hinduism. Like I like the like with Om the one chant he uses on one of his albums, but I love to sing that in the morning, and it's just a chant of liberation from one of the ragas.
the Om Triambakam
Yep, that's the exact
Yajamahe
one.
Sugandhin Priya.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
that one is like I sing that to my weed plants in the morning, and I sing that to
that's
myself,
beautiful.
and it
I
like
love it.
and like some people think it's goofy, but it's like what else is there to do? Like, am I supposed to just wake up and go on TikTok for 4 hours or whatever? It's like, why not? Like everyone, it's so quick to judge, but nobody actually practices. And if they did
Yeah.
practice, then they would feel it too. But
Right. Right.
trying to get a modern person just to meditate for 5 minutes is impossible. I mean, even with
Well,
myself, it was a
it's
challenge.
it's no accident, man. It's no accident that the main focus of consumers these days, the number one focus is deleting their focus and their attention span. They
The only thing that's of value.
that is our greatest resource is attention and focus, and that's why I'm always like almost to a dogmatic degree on this channel, saying like turn off the TikTok, like
Yeah.
even like YouTube shorts and stuff like that. It is robbing you of dopamine and attention.
Yeah.
And
Well,
it's and
that's why like most of our songs are over 5 minutes, or like, and now they're tending to tread in that 8 or 9. And like, I have friends that are musicians who are like, why can't you just write a normal song or play like a normal like 5 minute song? I'm like, because we're
why
not
can't you
gonna.
just grow your attention span?
Yeah, just like listen to what I'm trying to put into this. But it's, yeah, it's, I don't know, it's everyone has their own path, but it's like to even get people to take the first step is so difficult. But I remember like getting myself to meditate. Like I wanted to meditate, but like, and they're like, oh, I can't close my eyes. I can't this. I would do 2 eye shades and then a hat over my eyes, and then I would meditate with my eyes open because I couldn't keep my eyes closed. Like I was such a wound up person that closing
Yeah,
my,
your eyelids wouldn't stay shut.
yeah, they wouldn't stay shut. They'd be popping like this. And now I could do it in broad daylight with, my eyes closed, or I do like the open-eyed stare. Like when I play drums, I tend to do
Yeah.
the open-eyed stare where I pick a point and then, then I'm gone. And then
Yep.
it
Yep.
comes
Yep.
through is the thing. So, I wish I had more specifics to explain of like what energy I'm working with, but as the Hindus say, is like I just try to get to that divine place. And I call the one metaphor I've been using is like the Great Wall of China through time is like the illuminaries are, is like each one of us that becomes illumined just needs to fire up that flare. So hopefully like
Yeah.
one of us in the future can see that and then also do the same. And I don't know what the end of that is, but it feels very important to keep going. In a weird, it
The
feels
end
like
is
the
the
only thing.
beginning, man. We're doing all of this so that the universe can begin.
Yeah. So just finish the cycle and start over again.
Awesome. Well, what's next for the next year? Of course, plans are always subject to change. They say that we make plans and God laughs, but from where
Well,
you
he
stand now,
hasn't
what
me.
would do what?
I said he hasn't me. Anytime I've made
Yeah.
a plan, not a single one of my plans has ever worked out. So
Well,
I'm not a plan guy, but
what would you like to see yourself have at least reached for in the next year?
reaching for is it's more so it's like becoming a better version of that transparency to let the light
Sure.
come through, and just trying to hone my mind and body. Like again, like as much as like I would love to say I'm walking on water, like not quite. It's like maybe I'm 60-70% on the way there, but I would like to keep ascending to that place of like not being affected by my environment and truly just being the task
Yeah.
again. And not necessarily like in the same depressive way as maybe past selves have, but more in the, like this is happening. I'm good with it, and it's fine. And just it's a lot. It takes a lot because it's like when I first experienced divine, which was through like I literally went to source, touched it in a psychedelic experience, and that was when I was like, what the fuck is? But that was when I died. The
Sure. Yeah.
death while alive was like I returned back, and I just realized I could connect to something, but I had nothing to, I don't know, channel it through. Like I didn't have a music practice at the time. I didn't have an art
Sure.
practice at the time. It
No
was,
canvas. Yeah.
I had no canvas. And it's like to come from that place to like, this was one of my recent drawings, just like doodling.
That's gorgeous.
But like I've only done,
I love it.
I've done artwork for less than, and this was Thanksgiving. I did this with my little nephew one day, just goofing
Very, very
around.
interesting.
But it's this year, I guess I want to focus on understanding how colors affect the mind more. Is like
Okay.
I'm starting to understand how numbers and music do, and note choices and tunings and those things do. But I want to start to understand what I'm doing intuitively more. And again, it's like I can do so many things intuitively, but there's still this like I still don't know what it is. Like I kind of I'd like to observe what's coming through and understand why I'm doing what I'm doing when I'm doing it, instead of just being along for the ride. Started to be a little bit more of a navigator than a passenger princess, as the reference earlier.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to share some of your life with us. Very much appreciate it.
Yeah, it's been great chatting with you. Hope you well.
Yeah, I hope we stay in contact. I know we're both busy, but yeah, it was good to hear from you. I will send you the whole album from Shamash, because the whole album, it's called Triangle. The whole
Mhm.
album is really good. But yeah, I will send that to you, and we'll keep in touch. And it was good. It was good talking to you. Thanks again.
Thank you, man.
Yeah. Take care. Bye.
See ya.